I know that prayer is important, but why is it so hard to pray? Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to Espresso with Sky, giving you a fresh perspective on faith, life, God, and the Bible. I'm Pastor Sky, over here my two sidekicks. Hope you guys have an awesome week. Go ahead if you haven't done so, hit all those weird buttons. But the most important thing is, please leave an honest comment below. Would love to hear your honest opinion on today's topic. You want to support this ministry? We got PayPal and buymeacoffee.com, right? So let's get into it. Now, we all know that prayer is one of the most important aspects of our faith. God answers through prayers, God gives miracles through prayers, and we've heard tons of testimonies on these things. Now, the Bible also calls us in 1 Thessalonians 5:17 to pray continuously at all times. Prayer is the lifeline between us and God. You know, my pastor once told me that prayer is so important, prayer is like breathing. And when I thought about this deeply, it was so fitting, because the moment you stop breathing is the moment you die. And it's the same with people too, right? If you have a relationship with someone and the moment you stop communicating, you grow further and further and further away from each other until that relationship dies. And in the same way, prayer is like breathing. If we stop prayer is when our relationship dies with God. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, we just heard how important prayer is, but what is that biggest reason why we're not very good at prayer, or why we don't pray so well? So let's take a look at that today. First, let's take a look at the three factors that really affect our prayer. You may not even know it, but the where, who, and when really affects our prayer. So let's take a look at where first. What is where? It is location. And for some odd reason, human beings, we are affected and triggered by a location. Where is the place that we just feel compelled to pray? That it is holy and it's solemn. It's built for prayer. The atmosphere is all set up for it. It's church. I used to live in London, and there was St. Paul's Cathedral, and guess what? It was a sightseeing place, but even people who didn't have faith would walk in, and what's the first thing they do? They pray. They just pray. They don't even believe, but they pray. It incites prayer out of you because of this location. And that's why where you pray, it actually makes a difference. Of course, some people like to pray at home too, but the place where everyone prays is church. Now, the second one is the who. What does that mean? Who are you with? Are you with believers or non-believers? And that plays a role. Because when you're with believers, what happens? You freely pray. You can pray together. Ask them to pray for you. You can pray for them. It's such a free place where you're easily able to pray because of the people that you're with. If I'm with a bunch of believers at a restaurant, we just pray with no problem. Even the location's not good, but the people I'm with, it changes it where I can easily pray. But on the flip side, what if you're with people who are another religion or don't believe? You are kind of self-conscious, but you're more of just kind of concerned that you don't want to offend anyone, and you kind of feel out the situation. The who plays a big role, and it affects our prayers. Last but not least is the when, which is the time. Now, question is there a time where your prayer is the most powerful and the best? And here's the thing. Time plays a huge role. So let's just talk about church. There is service, right? And then there's before and after service. When do people pray the most? When do people feel it the most? When do people feel the power of prayer? Is it before the service, during the service, or after service? Guess what? If it was just about the location, if it was just about who you're with, then you should be able to pray at any single time. But the time makes a difference. People pray the most powerfully. They feel God's presence. They feel like the Holy Spirit coming upon, tears coming out. And just when they pray in tears and they cry out to God because it's the right time. Why is church service the time where you feel God the most? And it's not just this crowd effect, emotionally, physically, whatever it is, but we know that it's a spiritual thing. How so? Matthew chapter 18 verse 20 tells us that when two or more are gathered in my name, I will be there. When is the time where we worship? When is the time where we praise? When is the time where we come together with one voice crying out to God? during service. And this is why it is the most powerful time. It is the location plus the people and plus the right time. And it creates such a powerful moment. I'm not saying it's bad, no. That's the moment you have to take advantage of, and you got to pray with everything that you have. Why? Because when two or more gather, that is a guarantee that God's presence will come at that time. And this is why during church you feel it. And you're kind of like, oh, why doesn't my prayer feel like when it was at service, right? It's very, very different when you're alone, right? Then when you're with 1,000 people all praising and worshiping God at the same time. These are the three factors that really affect your prayer. So let's get into the biggest reason why our prayer life is so weak. And it's because we misunderstand the where, who, and when. People are waiting for the next time they go to church. When's the next Sunday service? The next midweek service? People are waiting for, when will I be with believers at the next small group? And some people even wait a year for the next retreat or the conference, just waiting for that spiritual hit when you pray, just tears coming out like, I can feel God. But if you really think about it, you have to remember your relationship with God. Does it matter who's next to you, who you're praying with, where you're praying, when you're praying? And the answer is no, because it is an individual relationship. Let me ask you this question. Who do you spend the time with most in your life? Who? Well, let's just take a look at church, okay? How many hours a week are you at church? How many hours a week are you spending in Bible study or services? Maybe 10 hours? Maybe 11, 12? Maybe people who are really fervent, maybe 15 hours? Guess what? 15 hours isn't even 10% of the week. It's not even 10%, which means 90 to 95% of your time is alone. It's by yourself. And you're like, well, no, I go to work, I go to school. And here's the thing. Even when you're at school, even when you're at work, it's not like you're constantly with people. You're not constantly talking to them. Even when you're eating together, you're eating alone, thinking about your things, reading your books. You're at work, you talk for a little bit and go and do your own work. Even at home with your family, are you constantly talking, constantly with them? And the answer is, you might be next to them, but you're doing your own thing. You go to your own room, right? You're checking your websites, going surfing on the internet, but you're spending most of your time alone. 90 to 95% of your time is not with people. Even if they're right next to you, it's by yourself. And the biggest reason why our prayer life is suffering is because we're waiting for the group. We're waiting for the place to go to church, to go to the Bible study, to do this and to do that, waiting for the retreat and the conference. Where God is saying 90 to 95% of your time is alone. That is the most important time. And Jesus actually said to the disciples in Matthew chapter 6, verse 6, he said, but when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. Jesus talked about the personal and private prayer only between you and God. But the biggest mistake is we're waiting for the where. We're waiting for the who, and we're waiting for the when. So what does this mean then? Now then, how can we truly understand the where, who, and when? How can we understand it so deeply that it'll change our individual prayer time with God? Well, let's start with the where, or the location. And we talked about the church, the place we love to pray at, and you can feel God the most. Why? It's God's house. God dwells in his house, and because God is there, we feel it. But the thing that has to change in your mind is, take a look at 1 Corinthians 3:16, and what does it say? Don't you know that you yourselves are God's temple, and that God's Spirit dwells in your midst? Where is the church? We keep looking for the physical church, but God says you are the church. You are the church because God dwells within your midst. You are taking the church everywhere you go. And when we realize and understand this, you can have great prayer every single place and location you're at because you're taking God with you. Which leads us to the who. Who are we praying with? We're not praying to ourselves. We're praying together with God. But think about it in this way. Can you imagine having one-on-one alone time with God? The Almighty, just you and God, telling God all your secrets, telling God what you really want in life. That's such an amazing thing that God is dwelling within you and you can spend that individual time with God. That's amazing. That's the who. And what about the when? Well, when do I spend time? And people are like, well, pray to Him all the time. But I want you to take a look at prayer with dating, like going out to eat. And like, how is that? What do you mean? Well, put it this way. When you go out on dates, do you always go to the nice restaurant? No. Sometimes you go to McDonald's. Sometimes you go to like a mid-level place. Sometimes you eat at home. Sometimes you cook. There's a lot of variations of dates that you have together with the person you love. So when you go to McDonald's, what do you wear? Well, it's not like you plan or wait for it. It's just like, let's go to McDonald's. You're wearing t-shirts and flip-flops. Of course, shorts, right? Or whatever it is, right? So you're just wearing like casual, comfortable clothes. And in the same way, there are times during the day, you don't need to be on your knees. You don't even need to close your eyes. It's just thinking about God. Talking to God in your mind. You know, at work, like, oh God, please help me. I really need your help here. Yeah, it's a very casual, comfortable time. But there's always those dates that we look forward to. The one that you plan, that you dress up for, you get your hair cut, you wear your nicest things. And in that same way, you have to plan your time with God every day. And I do suggest the earlier in the morning, the better, when there's no schedules. The worst prayer is when you have something 5 minutes later, you're like, oh, please God, oh, please God. Oh. You can't really concentrate. But if you have nothing for the next hour or so, it's so easy just to be in God's presence. Set the time every day, that short amount of time, whether it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour, whatever it is, set that time, the when. It'll be your personal service with God. And when we start to get to understand the where, the location, I am the temple of God. The who, I'm meeting with the almighty loving God. And when, I set my time to meet with God. When you start to do these things, your prayer life will begin to change. Because remember, 90 to 95% of your time is not with other people. It's on your own and by yourself. And that's the time you need to spend with God. All right. So thank you so much for joining us for today's topic. I really want to hear your comments, your opinions on today's topic. So go ahead and write them down. Everyone have an awesome week. And I hope that you guys change your prayer life and make it really strong and robust. All right. This is Pastor Sky for Espresso with Sky. These are my not my suit tide kicks. It's my 2 sidekicks. And we'll see you guys again next time. All right. Bye-bye. Suit tide kicks. I did that again.